Hello there, my friend, and welcome to another episode of Talk Music Talk with Boice. I am Boice, and this is my podcast you are listening to. Thank you for listening. If this happens to be your very first time checking it out, Talk Music Talk is a weekly music interview podcast where I have long-form conversations with people connected to music from different genres and different backgrounds, both established and emerging singers, songwriters, music therapists, music journalists. And on this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking to Stephen Kijak. He is a writer, a director. He makes documentaries. This year, he released a wonderful movie, one of my favorite movies of the year, Shoplifters of the World. It is a perfect love letter to the Smiths. It takes place in 1987, Denver. A group of friends go out for the night to party to mourn the breakup of the Smiths, their favorite band. And also, one of the friends holds a DJ hostage and makes him play the Smiths all night long. I can't think of anything better to do. That doesn't sound like a bad thing. It is Stephen's first narrative film since 1996 when he made Met Picssso. In the span of those 25 years, he has directed some of the best music docs. 30th Century Man, which was about Scott Walker. Also, he did Stones in Exile, which was the making of the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street. I had a great time talking to him. In this conversation, we talk about how he became a filmmaker, his beginning career intentions, themes in his movies and documentaries. We talk about his influences. We also talk about how he sees himself and what he decides to work on. Plus, we talk about the making of Shoplifters of the World, his love of the Smiths, and also you're going to find out some of his favorite albums from the 80s. Here it is, without further ado, my conversation with Stephen Kijak. Enjoy. So, Shoplifters, which I love, great movie.
Thank
really
you.
Enjoyed it. This is your first narrative since Never Met Picssso, is that?
Oh, good Lord, you remembered. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it seems like 4 or 5 lifetimes ago.
Did you, so with so many music documentaries in between, did you have an idea what your career would look like? Like, what was your intentions at the beginning? Do both?
I thought I would be like the American Almodovar or something. Like, I really wanted to do more of a, I envisioned more of a scripted kind of Euro art type career for myself. Yeah, documentaries sort of happened to me by accident. But I'm glad it did, because it's been a really fulfilling and sustaining career. Mm-hmm. You know, once I kind of locked in to the music groove, I just ended up working with some of the best producers and collaborators, you know, and we really built like a little family around the films, which I, having kind of seen it now from the other side, I understand is quite rare, you know? Yeah. So I consider myself very lucky.
Mm-hmm. What was the first documentary?
Actually, the first one was not a music film. It was a funny little film called Cinemania. Okay. That was about manic obsessive film buffs in New York City. The kind of little oddballs who just go to the movies every day, all day, 2, 3, 4 times a day, and do nothing else. You know, it's this really eccentric subculture, and they're super funny and real, like just real New Yorkers. You know, they're a very specific breed. Mm-hmm. And I made that in collaboration with a German filmmaker who I'd met, Angela Kreislieb. We collaborated on it. And it became a little festival favorite. You know, it's a film about people who are crazy about films. Mm-hmm. So it was this little film festival, like juggernaut. It took us all over the world. A very tiny budget. But it was a great opportunity. I was trying to, I had done the first film. I'd moved to New York, was trying to get another scripted something or other off the ground, and was not having much luck. And this opportunity presented itself, and it's like storytelling is storytelling, you know. And it was we met great characters, the kind of people you couldn't invent, you know what I mean? And we just took it and ran. It was a lot of fun, and it just started. It started me off on the nonfiction path.
What do you? Is there like a spark or something, a thread between all the nonfiction movies? Like, what is it you look for or see that needs to sustain you throughout the entire project?
It's interesting. Like, the first music doc was something that I pursued. I developed, my film about Scott Walker, the great musician,
another great
who passed away a year or so ago, who was really my hero, and it was a real labor of love. So that was almost just like blind passion. Like, I just felt driven to do it, because if I don't do it, someone else might do it, or it might never get done. Yeah. So that was just driven by a sheer like love of the subject and the music. And it was great because it really was the first one that I did entirely, self-generated. I had a great producing partner who's become a lifelong friend. And we really did it together, and we learned a lot of stuff along the way. But yeah, since then, it's interesting. Like, all the other docs have, for the most part, been like work for hire. Like, they come to me, and but you find something in all of them that connects. I think it's more about the approach, which I always say is kind of like you research and dig into the subject that you're faced with to try to figure out what's the DNA of the musician, the music, what makes them tick, what's the tone and tempo and texture of the music that can then tell you how to make the film. We always go kind of from the inside out. We want to tell a story that's really like music forward. We don't really do just the clip and commentary. I mean, we want to tell stories. We want to like tell emotional stories. We want to kind of get under the surface of the musician. So in a way, like, I don't have to necessarily be a super fan. It's just like, there's a story here. Let's tell it. Let's find a way to do that through the music.
Okay. How do you get to the story?
Well, it's really about analyzing what you're kind of being asked to do, right? If it's tell us how the Rolling Stones made the album Exile on Main Street, you start trying to figure out what that story is. There's research, there's multiple books. So you read all those, and then you interview this, you figure out maybe what's missing, or how can we take this kind of, like, what's then the visual language that we need to use to tell the story? Because it's maybe been written about, maybe there's archival footage, but it hasn't all been synthesized. You know what I mean? Yeah. So sometimes going in, the exact story you want to tell. Sometimes you have a general sense of it. And what we tend to do, or what I like to tend to do, is leave a lot open for the discovery of it, through the process. You're figuring it out through the interviews. Things and story and theme and character are being revealed to you, and then a lot of that then comes into play when you're editing. I mean, I like to leave a lot of looseness, in order to really kind of find it and figure it out as we go. Sometimes. Do you see yourself in the documentaries? Like, if you look back over them as a whole, like the themes that you are drawn to? Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the thing. It's interesting. Like, with these films, they often, because they're always artist driven, it's about a musician, it's about an album, it's about a whole career or whatever. People will look at them through the music and the musician first. Sometimes you read things that people write as if the movies have just emerged fully formed, or they'll just write about the artist, and you'll go, but there were filmmakers here who actually did the work, crafted these pieces, and your craft kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. But we put a lot of ourselves into it. I mean, we become completely obsessed and connected to the stories, I mean, they're jobs at the end of the day, but they're, they all become passion projects. I think where we find ourselves, and I always say ourselves because it really is a collaborative effort, I've worked with an amazing editor, Claire Didier, on a number of projects now. And My producers are very creative producers, either if it's not John Batzek or Diane Becker, on the Passion Pictures side of the spectrum, or Mia Bays, who did Scott Walker and the Backstreet Boys with me. We're all in there, and I think it's about like a sensitivity to an approach and, how we choose to interview somebody or what we'll choose to follow or how we'll kind of shape the narrative, and sometimes it's personal taste. I have said this many times. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but to me, the films operate like mixtapes.
Okay.
I was that kid that would make mixtapes for people. So to me, it's the curation of even how we place music in the films has to kind of take people on a journey.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, and I mean, there's all the common themes of just like, creativity about like where you center that in your own lives, how that sort of pushes you forward, the struggles and triumphs and tragedies that, creative individuals kind of experience through their lives, their careers. I'm very interested in that, in the process. Process is really important to me. Because we all go through it. I mean, I'm inspired by these people and, I sometimes wish I had been in a band, so like, it's like that kind of creative mojo it's a two-way street to me in the work,
Okay. Do you have a music and background in music?
I mean, I'm a drummer, I play drums in a band. I just got, a new electric drum set for Christmas this year. Okay. So I've been honing my chops again. I'm like a latent kind of musician. I just play in my bedroom. But it's always been an interest and an obsession, record collecting and just listening to it constantly, always on the lookout for new sounds and new experiences. So it's it's really present in my life. You know?
What led to the path of filmmaker as opposed to, say, music? But
I don't know. I just feel like lugging the drum kit around became really cumbersome after a point. I don't know. There's a path of least resistance effect sometimes I see in life. I mean, I was always a writer. Like writing was kind of the first thing that came naturally. So I sort of pursued that down a road of initially journalism, but then that felt creatively frustrating in some degrees. And that evolved more into creative writing and screenwriting in school. Through that emerged the filmmaking.
Okay.
So it just kind of, it was a bit of a natural progression that way. But the films have allowed me to get back to keeping music sort of central to, my creative project.
Yeah. As you were all these years of making documentaries, have you been like stockpiling scripts? Like one day I'm going to get back to this.
I have so many scripts. I've written so many scripts. Sometimes you feel like it's just practice to keep flexing the muscle, but Shoplifters was a way kind of to finally build that bridge from the docs back to narrative through music. I have a bunch of ridiculous screenplays on the shelf. I kind of just wove in and out of multiple genres, and I think I've got like a horror, but a thriller. I wrote a lot when I could. It became harder and harder the busier we got with the documentaries, but it's always kind of been hanging out sort of on deck,
Okay. When did Shoplifters, like I did, and start working on the script come?
That started a good 10 years ago or so. Yeah, it was just that, and the idea to try to tell a little story that was music centric about me and my friends kind of growing up new wave in our little small town in Massachusetts. I kind of saw it as maybe a one summer in the life of, a little coming of age with a great 80s soundtrack, and had just been kind of toying with the ideas and the characters. And then I was chatting with Lorianne Hall, who has the story credit on Shoplifters, just an old friend. She was here in LA. and had grown up in Denver, Colorado. And she just said, dude, you remember that thing that happened when the Smiths broke up in Denver? The kid held up the radio station, and I had no idea what she was talking about.
Yeah.
But her motivation was like, this would be a great idea for a film. It sounded like a little bit like Airheads, which apparently may have been influenced by this thing as well. But I just thought like, oh, this is great. This is wall-to-wall Smiths. Let's take my characters from small town Cape Cod, move them to Denver, and instant screenplay. You know what I mean? It just sort of felt like in the groove, like we've got it. So that's really how it started,
Yeah. Were the Smiths your band, or you just thought their music would work for a film?
No, I was a big Smiths fan. I loved them. I mean, it was like I was, a suburban kid in the 80s. Like there was just, who loved British music. It was, the Smiths, The Cure, New Order, and Depeche Mode. I mean, the usual suspects. It wasn't so unusual now or at the time even, but at the time that was like, those were the kind of the defining bands of our moment, right? With a whole bunch of others thrown in there for good measure. But yeah, no, I was a massive fan. And they really meant the world to me. And, they have that mythic kind of status already. So, to construct a film around that myth of, a heartbroken fan holding up a radio station to just force them to play the Smiths all night. Plus, you get to use the Smiths from top to bottom. It was just too good to be true, right? Yeah. Like, what a great vibe, So, yeah, I mean, you couldn't kind of, I guess you could do it with another band, but I just think the passion inherent in the fandom, it also just kind of feeds into it.
Yeah. What was the first time you heard the Smiths? You remember?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, it was Cape Cod, sitting there in my little bedroom. We had a great college radio station that I listened to all the time, WKKL. It's still on the air. Cape Cod Community College Radio. They played How Soon Is Now. I can remember it. I can just see the little bedroom and the speakers, and I remember that sound coming out. It was that moment where, like, you hear something, you don't know what it is, you love it. You call the radio station, you can't get through, like, oh my God, what is this thing? And then weeks later, just by coincidence, I just bought randomly, based on the cover, this record at the mall in the import section, and just thought it looked cool. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what the Smiths were. It just was a cool looking 12-inch single. Took it home, put it on, and it was that song. So, I thought, this is it's destiny. But that's it. That's just like the first time. And it's the one that really goes deep,
And then you started like just collecting everything.
Oh yeah. Like, I turned out a friend of mine had like, their first album on tape. So we'd drive to school listening to that. And then like another album would come out. And then I just started grabbing it all. Yeah.
See, you were like, I was the only person in my high school listening to the Smiths. Like no one,
really.
Yeah, so that was me. Did you for the movie? Like, how did you decide like what songs? Or first of all, do you have to find out? Can you like licensing the songs? Is that the first thing?
That was the first thing we did. I wrote a draft. I wanted to get it done pretty quickly and get it in front of them just to see. Are you going to shut us down, or can we actually do this? So luckily, we had a music supervisor in the UK make the first attempt. Luckily, I had already interviewed Johnny Marr in my Scott Walker documentary. Morris, who's manager at the time, was also kind of like a colleague and a friend. So we had a little bit of an open door, and some goodwill going in, and then it went through the usual channels, and there was a general thumbs up, like if you can afford it, go for it. So the real trick was then just, financing the movie, getting it cast, getting it made, making sure we could pay for the music and get it all tied up and licensed properly and all that. That was more the trick. Weirdly enough, the permissions or the initial goodwill sort of thumbs up came relatively early in the process based on the writing. So
Okay. So when you were writing the script, how clear were you what songs were going to go where the songs came first?
A lot of it was on the page. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it just was like a feel thing, it's like, oh, what would be great here? Oh, I'd love to play The Queen is Dead right now. Or, certain things sort of seem to speak to what was happening in the scene, like Girl Afraid. Really, obviously it's all about what's happening in the moment. And, I Know It's Over just kind of fits that melancholy mood of, that one scene when Cleo just is in abject despair, and Billy calls her a poser, and she's just confronted with her directionless life and lack of meaning. And that just seemed to like, oh, that's the one, right? Just so, yeah, we just played with it a little, I think of the initial draft, I must have had like 35, almost 40 songs. And then it became apparent that was not going to be possible. The task was then like, please pick 20.
Okay.
So you go and you prune and you recalibrate, and a bit tricky, but we managed to squeeze it in.
Okay. Did you feel like with this movie, I'm going to have to please a really tough Smiths audience?
Oh, God. I tried not to think about it. There just came a point when I felt like I was making the film for about 5 or 6 people. You know what I mean? Like, it was me and my friends. We had some push and pull with some financiers that, you just felt like, oh my God, just make it a little easier to understand. You're quoting too many things. It's too insider. We need to make this for everybody. I just feel like if you make something for everyone, you've made it for no one.
Yeah.
You have to be, I think we had to commit to making something very specific. And in a lot of ways, it's more just that it's specific in some ways to my experience as a person who is a certain age in a certain place, right? It's Denver, Colorado, but it's kind of in quotes. To me, it's a very like just your American suburban 80s experience of the outsider teen who's just enthralled to the music of another land. You know what I mean? It was very exotic to us. And it became very tribal. It was how we defined ourselves in opposition to the mainstream, which is kind of not a thing right now. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was so much clickier back then, but in kind of a nice way, right? You had your own little, and there weren't as many options either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't as many bands. You kind of collected these things that you liked, and it informed your fashion and your friends and what you listened to and how you decorated your room and all this stuff. And so, yeah, and I'm finding that there's a legion of people who are really connecting to that. I think it leaves just enough room that people can interpret their own sort of melancholy youth through the characters, and even the young people that were in it weren't necessarily connecting to the ideas of the era, but they were looking at the friendships and the mechanisms of the night and the friendships and their individual struggles as people, which they also related to. So, those little things kind of indicate that you just might be on the right track. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Were you thinking about movies from that period? Because the movie they mentioned, Pretty in Pink, which was how I got introduced to the Smiths. Actually, that was my first time hearing the Smiths.
Yeah.
And so, like, were you thinking about the '80s movies and how your movie would connect to that in any way?
Oh yeah, I mean, we were that generation. We were the John Hughes generation, right? Like those movies were quotes our movies. We saw ourselves in The Breakfast Club. We saw ourselves in Pretty in Pink. We got the soundtracks. We just, we loved it. But then the older you get, you kind of, you can look back on them in a way and think, oh, now wait a minute, do those really represent us and speak to us? Like Pretty in Pink was always something that we'd kind of look at and reevaluate, kind of like the character says, like, why was the motivation always to assimilate into popularity? There was this dynamic of like, that was sort of the goal of these outsider characters. It was kind of like a win when she scores like the popular guy, right?
Yeah.
But why? You know, Ducky's awesome. Like, why don't you guys get together? Come on. All right, maybe he's gay. Who knows? But like, I don't know. It was definitely in the back of our minds. I mean, someone had said that it doesn't feel like a movie about the 80s. It feels like a movie from the 80s, which I like. Yeah, exactly.
I would agree.
We wanted it to be kind of like it sprung out of the era itself. And the guideposts for me were less of like, let's try to make a John Hughes movie. And we were looking at movies that were kind of represented an older time. I mean, American Graffiti and Diner were kind of the big ones for me, because these were movies made in like, you know, early 80s, 70s, about the 50s, you know? So I was looking at that kind of throwback sort of dynamic. And a lot of what you see in the aesthetic of the Smiths, in the clothes, the artwork, all of it it's coming out in the 80s, but it's all really informed by the 50s and 60s.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we thought, let's kind of play with that a little bit too.
What was one of your favorites from the 80s?
Favorite
movies from the 80s?
Movies from the 80s?
Yeah. What was your top one?
My top movies from the 80s.
Yeah.
Well, I got to say, we watched Liquid Sky almost every weekend on VHS tape. I swear to God, like the cultiest, most messed up movie. It's just like, you know, it's just that totally cult new wave film that is.
I've never seen that.
Oh my God. It just stands alone. It's really an odd film. It's set in New York amongst the demimonde of like new wave nightclubbers. A very small alien has arrived in New York, and it feeds on, I believe, like endorphin, the chemicals that are released in the brain when you either shoot heroin or have an orgasm. So it goes around killing all these people, and it attaches itself to this one woman named Margaret, who also plays her brother Jimmy in this bizarre dual role. And everybody she hooks up with seems to die because of this alien. I mean, it sounds absolutely ludicrous. The acting is really stilted. It's really wooden, but it's all neon. You know, everything's like just bright neon, dark clubs, crazy clothes, absolutely mental hair and makeup. It's such a cool cult classic. And we loved that movie so much. But you know, there's that, and then of course, like, you know, like I said, we were children of, we were John Hughes's generation, so those movies really loom large. But I was also discovering, you know, the early films of like Derek Jarman. We had a great Blockbuster in our town. So I would always just go to like the foreign movies, because, you know, they're always going to be a little sexier than the mainstream movies. Things like The Last of England or Jubilee by Derek Jarman were real favorites. And I did rent Betty Blue on a whim, and, you know, just that was a favorite. I mean, I'm drawing a blank now. There were a lot of very obscure European art movies coming through our house. Yeah.
Do you find these ways pushed out into your films?
What's that?
Work? Do you find some of the influences of these movies pushed out into your films?
I mean, it's hard to kind of wrap that stuff up into a documentary. So not really, but it's always kind of hanging out, kind of as like, you know, inspiration in some way. Hopefully, you know, digging back into more narrative stuff as we go forward, I'll get to play with some more of those influences.
I wanted to ask you about the attention to details in the movie. You've got one character's reading the Sheila Delaney play. One of the scenes was someone's reading the New York Dolls Morrissey book. And what was this book they were reading in the Sheila Take a Bow scene? I'm like freezing.
Oh gosh, there's a whole bunch. We've got like, you got a kid, like we've got, that kid was supposed to be all through the movie, but he bagged after shooting one scene because it was too long or something. So we had to get the character was called the Tweety Reader. Okay. He was literally going to pop up in every other scene, reading a different book in the background. But we had to kind of share that around. It's ridiculous. There's so many silly little references and Easter eggs and in the lyric, I mean, the dialogue and the set design. And one scene, we got the kid he's reading Taste of Honey, which was, a core influence on the lyrics on most of the first record. And then in the party scene, it changes. He's got initially you see a kid reading. There's a famous issue of Smash Hits magazine where Morrissey and Pete Burns from Dead or Alive are on the cover because it was a big buzzy story. They were like best pals. It's a very funny article. I'd recommend any fan to look it up online. It's just they talk about each other and their friendship, and it's just kind of bitchy and funny. So we had to get that in there. Obviously, I'm a big Dead or Alive fan. And then as the kids are running out, that same dude is reading a book called Exit Smiling, which was a book Morrissey wrote when he was a kid. Okay. Just about like his favorite Hollywood stars. Okay. It's a really goofy book. And then he also had written a book about James Dean called James Dean James Dean is dead or not dead. James Dean is dead. That's in another. There's bits of that stuff everywhere. Yeah. And even, I was a college DJ. Even the soundboard looked like my college DJ station. We got so lucky. It was just, where was that place? I think in Poughkeepsie. We were shooting in upstate New York, and they just found an abandoned radio station. Yeah. I think they had walked away from it in like 1991, and it was only used now as like an AM relay station. Right, okay. So there was a guy that would go and make sure all the machines were on, and the only thing running was like a bank of equipment and then a big antenna in the back that was just used to relay AM signals. But the whole place was abandoned. And it was garbage everywhere. But once we cleaned it up, that little room was just vintage. It was perfect. Yeah. I'm like, and it all turned on, and it was incredible. I mean, the design of that little spot was so awesome. We got really lucky. Yeah. How long did you film the movie? How long did it take? Was the shoot? Oh, Jesus, we had 22 days, and one of those got totally boned by snow and rain. It was harrowing. It was like we had like just barely 21 days to make it all happen. That's pretty not incredible. Enough by any stretch. Yeah. Are you thinking about more narrative films? Is it too soon, or? No, we have a new script ready to go. We're putting it together right now. And it better not take 10 years to get off the ground. We have another kind of, in theory, I'm trying to like work a little 80s trilogy and do another one in the same vein with a different band. But also I've got a bunch of documentary stuff kind of, in development, and I'm attached to a few things. And it's been a bit quiet the first quarter this year, but it's been nice to just kind of take a breather and like start just developing some new stuff. It's been really busy these last 4 or 5 years. So it's been nice to take a little bit of a break. But definitely I want to keep pushing out, on all fronts. This was a lot of fun. So does the documentaries influence the narrative, or like what are they taking from one another? Do you see anything there? Yeah, well, I mean, it's all storytelling, and it's all like, to me, it's all just music-driven storytelling. I come from a narrative background and have just applied all that learning and thinking to the features, I mean, the docs. They definitely influence each other. I mean, it's just learning how to craft, just story. We don't have the benefit of a screenplay when we're making these documentaries. It's really just like sometimes like that first few weeks of an edit can just be so confusing and you can see the uphill battle, and how do we crack this thing and make sense of all this material, but it flexes a great storytelling muscle, It's different, but to me it's all about finding those emotional arcs through the songs in a lot of ways.
Okay, cool. And I have to ask you this, Stephen. In the movie, what was your 80s style of those characters? Like, if we would have went back to the 80s and saw you, who would you have looked like in the movie? I'm
definitely I think I'm split in two, because I was that grumpy kid who pretentious, new waver who worked at the one record store in our little town. So I was their first employee. It was this little independent record store, and I fucking wore my little trench coat, and I thought I was, before I was rocking Morrissey cardigans, I thought I was in The Cure. You know what I mean? I was like a little baby goth. So I had a little bit of that, but Patrick obviously is the character who's kind of like my story. So it's a bit of a merge of it's split identities. I'm a little bit all over the place, but that's, that definitely, that group really was very close to home. I know those kids, that was us.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. So for your three, I just thought of this on the spot, but your three favorite 80s albums.
Oh my God. 3 favorite 80s albums. Yeah. It's how long do we have? 3 favorite. I got to say, I'm a massive Susie and the Banshees fan. Hyena, everyone would probably go Juju first, which I love, but somehow the majesty of that record, I think it was 84 it came out. Robert Smith from The Cure had joined the Banshees at that point. So it was just a goth's wet dream, that record. You know what I mean? The artwork by Anton Corbin, the photograph by Anton Corbin, Susie is in her prime sort of dominatrix goth kitten mode. Robert's got the white shirt with the rosary and his hair is insane. It's just towering for me. It's just got so much magic and mystery to it. It's one of my favorite records. So you got that. I'm almost going to just pick for the Smiths. I'm going to say Louder Than Bombs. Yeah. Just because I love a compilation. I love their compilations. And that's the double record. It's just got everything. Obviously, it's impossible to pick, but somehow that one just I think that was senior year in high school. It was the tape we had on total constant rotation. I love the stretch of singles from Is It Really So Strange, Panic, Ask, Sheila Take a Bow. It's all just it's their glam rock masterpiece, and it's got all the other songs. It's got William, It's Really Nothing. It's got Asleep. It's got
it's perfect.
Half a Person. It's just, you can get lost in that record. Yeah. It's so fantastic. And oh my God, the third record from the 80s. You're real. It's impossible. I'm just gonna say third favorite, I couldn't do without record. Probably something like Ocean Rain by Echo and the Bunnymen. I think really went deep. That was a real magic record for me as well. Just the arrangements, the songwriting. There's not a bad. There isn't a bum note on that record. I like the strings. I like the magic and mystery inherent in some of these records. I kind of missed punk a little bit, and but I wasn't quite Duran-y either. I like kind of the darker side of, the romantic melancholy stuff. Is there really the ones that just get me?
I'm there with you, dude. This was wonderful, Stephen. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed this so much. Great
talking to you, man.
Yeah, I love the movie. Likewise. Everyone should go and see it. Best place for people to check you out online?
You can find me on just stephenkijak.com. I just have a website that has links to all the other films and trailers and information and all that. And Shoplifters is just hanging out on Amazon and iTunes and anywhere you get your video on demand.
Yeah, and everyone should see it. Thank you, Steve. It was a pleasure, man.
You bet. Thanks so much.
Sure. And there you have it, my conversation with Stephen Kijak. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you check out Shoplifters of the World. Also his other movies. You will enjoy them as well. If you would like more information on Talk Music Talk, head on over to talkmusictalk.com for more podcast information and to stream every single episode. Also follow me on Instagram at thisisboice. Some special requests for you. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music and Audible Play, Samsung Free, iHeartRadio, pretty much everywhere. Just search for Talk Music Talk. Wherever you are, please leave a 5-star rating and or review because it helps expose TMT to brand new listeners. Also, please download the TMT app. It is free wherever you like to get your apps. Again, just search for Talk Music Talk. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, and there will be a next time, this one's for you, Liz.